The standards, certificates, and policies that decide who is recognized, who is trusted, and who is refused. This is the identity layer. If you turn on any industry webinar, read a vendor white paper, or walk the floor of a digital identity conference today, you'll hear a single message repeated like a mantra. Interoperability is nearly solved. We have the protocols, we just need to implement them. Now, that's a comfortable narrative. It's also, in my opinion, completely wrong. Interoperability is not a technical problem waiting to be deployed. It's a profound government or governance failure that has been deferred and is waiting to be confronted. Welcome to episode 1 of the Identity Layer. I'm Tunji, and this platform is an independent one built specifically for practitioners, policymakers, and the architects working at the intersection of digital identity, public infrastructure, and trust frameworks. Now, we are not here to give you vendor marketing of any form. We are not here to repeat conference hype, and we're definitely not doing beginner explainers. We are here to have the real rigorous conversation about how global infrastructure is actually being built, stress tested, and broken. Now, before we dive in, our standard line for this series is this. This podcast is strictly independent. Statements and technical breakdowns shared here do not constitute corporate or governmental endorsement of any form. We draw clear boundaries between technical architecture and institutional politics. We call the gaps exactly as we see them. Now, because this is our very first episode, I want to take a step back and explain why this podcast actually exists and what we are setting out to achieve and how this season is going to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at an unprecedented crossroads in human history. The choices being made right now by architects, standards bodies, and government agencies are going to lock in the social, economic, and legal frameworks for billions of people over the next generation. If we get the plumbing wrong today, we institutionalize exclusion and fragmentation for decades to come. The aim of the identity layer is very simple: to serve as an uncompromised, zero-hype zone where we can dissect those architectures with absolute intellectual honesty. We want to bring together the fragmented silos of this industry. We want to be able to bridge the massive gap between the engineers writing cryptographic specifications in closed working groups and the policymakers deploying national registration systems in the real world. Now, to do that, we won't be able to just look at abstract code or academic white papers. Over the course of this season, I will be inviting the actual caliber of individuals who are driving the infrastructure forward. We're bringing on national digital identity program leads who are managing enrollments for tens of millions of citizens around the world. We'll be talking face-to-face with the primary wallet architects, cryptographic trust specialists, EIDAS2 implementers across EU member states, and standard contributors from the ISO, ICAO, W3C, and the OpenID Foundation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these aren't sales pitches. There will be rigorous, peer-level debriefs on what happens when theory actually hits reality. And speaking of reality, I'm incredibly excited to share a major initiative that we are launching later in this season. From about episode 6 or 7, we're introducing a segment we're going to call Boots on the Ground. As experts, we spend a lot of time in the comfort of conference rooms talking about trust frameworks, cryptographic primitives, and data schemas. But what is actually happening on the street? Now, we've partnered with a number of grassroots videographers in multiple countries and across the global south and emerging economies, but also in developed economies. They will be conducting raw, face-to-face interviews with everyday individuals navigating these systems. Now, we're going to look at the human side of the identity layer, the real challenges people face with initial civil enrollment, the uphill battle of identity verification, the friction of obtaining breeder documents like birth certificates just to get the baseline of a digital credential, and what the actual expectations are from a trusted digital state. Now, the UK, for example, has just announced that they're scrapping their digital identity infrastructure that they were just planning to build. Interestingly, there are some institutions in the United Kingdom that are advising the Global South about digital identity, but they don't have it in their own country. Do as I say, not as I do. Moving on. Now, let me make one thing clear. Our objective with Boots on the Ground is constructive and not destructive. We will be intentionally filtering out direct, targeted criticism of government agencies. We are not here to burn bridges or assign political blame. Our goal is to surface systemic, structural challenges of identity deployment so that the architects listening to this show can build more resilient and inclusive systems. That is why we are here, and this is our roadmap. Now let's dive straight into the deep end for episode 1 and answer the core architectural question that motivated me to launch this show. Why do systems that use the same cryptographic primitives and transport protocols completely fail due to interoperate in production? To understand why, we have to dismantle what I call the interoperability illusion. This illusion is the belief that if we can pass a credential over a unified technical pipe like OpenID for VP or DITCOM, we have achieved interoperability. But the protocol does not equal governance. When you ignore the structural boundaries between legal frameworks, state sovereignty, and trust anchors, your technical architecture becomes nothing more than a fragile, paper tiger. Now, let's look at how the architecture actually breaks down. We aren't looking at flat network pipe. We're looking at a 4-layer structured stack that every identity system must traverse. Firstly, the cryptographic layer. Second, the transport protocol layer. Third, the trust establishment layer. And fourthly, the legal and institutional recognition layer. This is where standard interoperability diagrams completely fall apart because they assume that you can seamlessly wire incompatible trust models together. Consider the 4 main architectures dominating global policy today. The European Digital Identity Wallet, EUDIW, the ISO 18013-5 mobile driving licenses, the W3C Consortium verifiable credentials, and ICAO's digital travel credentials. They don't mix. Now, some of them rely on rigid, centralized, state-issued X509 PKI hierarchies, specifically VICALs and the ICAO PKD. The verified systems must fundamentally trust the state issuer's root certificate authority. W3C, decentralized identifiers, reject centralized state roots. That's just how they were designed. They rely on decentralized registries, distributed ledgers, like blockchain or whatever, or web-based resolvers where trust is derived mathematically via cryptographic proofs. Now, the EU Digital Identity Wallet is trying to straddle a closed federated ecosystem of national trust lists under EIDAS 2 regulations. So, when a vendor tells you that their platform seamlessly bridges these worlds out of the box because they accept both standards cryptographically, they are not actually telling the whole story. They're confusing a shared math equation with a shared governance breach. But the real breakdown isn't the cryptographic layer, it's the absolute top of the stack, legal and institutional recognition. This is the layer where billions of dollars in infrastructure are currently being deferred. Now, what happens when a legally binding credential issued by a sovereign nation in the global south is presented to an automated border or banking system in Europe. The technical pipe works perfectly well. The signature is verified, but the institutional governance layer says, I don't recognize the legal status of this issuer. Now, this is the actual background for digital sovereignty. So until we build institutional governance frameworks that can map legal liability across borders, structural fragmentation will always win, and your technical infrastructure will remain totally useless or redundant. If you're a government digital identity lead, a wallet architecture, or an ecosystem designer, you can't afford to buy into the hype. Here are 3 architectural questions you must take back to your teams on Monday morning. First, what is our fallback trust model? If your wallet architecture is built to rely exclusively on decentralized registries, how does it then authenticate a credential originating from a legacy centralized state PKI, public key infrastructure, without introducing a single point of failure? Second, how are we handling the relying party problem? The technical capability to hold a credential means that means absolutely nothing if the ecosystem of merchants, banks, and border agencies doesn't have a production-ready, low-friction mechanism to dynamically update their trusted issuer lists. These trust lists we'll talk about later. Third, we are confusing technical protocol with legal recognition. Before optimizing your transport pipelines for speed, trace the legal liability chain for your data. Who pays when a verified credential turns out to be a fraudulent one due to failure at the initial civil registration enrollment? I have seen a lot of this in real life use cases. Now, we don't solve these issues with high-level overviews. We solve them with detailed technical blueprints. If you're an architect or a project lead who needs to build systems that survive real-world deployment, I have published the full assurance mapping matrix and the production-ready configuration blueprint for bridging X509 PKI routes with decentralized resolvers. That architecture is fully documented, drawn out via editable mermaid diagrams. I love those diagrams. I log behind the paywall for our premium subscribers right now over on Substack at the identity layer substack.com. I repeat, identitylayer.substack.com. If you're serious about saving your engineering team 3 to 6 months of trial and error, head over there and unlock the blueprint. Now, next week, we're going to deep dive into the European wallet reality. We will be analyzing the practical gaps inside the EU Digital Identity Wallet ARF, or Architecture and Reference Framework. We'll examine how EIDAS 2 is putting immense pressure on implementers and how exactly where those engineering deployments are beginning to crack. This is the identity layer. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, hit the subscribe button below. It generally helps the show to reach the people who build these systems. And the full technical write-up with diagrams, architecture, and the sources is available on our Substack at identitylayer.substack.com. Again, identitylayer.substack.com. Join us there and see you next time.